My name is Kenneth Ferguson and I head up the CSJ work in Scotland. We recently opened the Scotland office and we really felt it was important that we understood what was happening in Scotland. So to do that, we did two things. First of all, we polled 1,000 people in Scotland to ask what they thought was happening in terms of public services and charities. And the second thing that we did was we invited 80 of the brightest and the best charity leaders from the small grassroots charities in Scotland to come and tell us what they saw. And there was one consistent message. It was, we're drowning, not waving. And that's the title of our report that we produced on this and about what is happening in Scotland with small charities. So what did the polling say? The polling said that 82% of Scots say that poverty has got worse over the last 5 years. And that's just an appalling figure. And we were shocked by that. And it was clear that 68% of them, nearly 2/3 of them, said that they blame that on failing public services. And another 63% said that what they thought was that charities were being stretched beyond their capacity. And the reason for that is that they're seeing increased demand, but seeing decreased resources coming to them. And they just don't believe that they're getting sufficient funding to meet the needs that they're actually facing. So what did the grassroots charities then see? They saw three things in particular. First of all, that poverty again was increasing, and particularly in-work poverty and child poverty. And in-work poverty they saw was particularly bad, where the situation was that the jobs were so insecure that it was actually forming a poverty trap on benefits. And what was happening was that jobs were insecure, they were low paid, and there was no progression within them. So it was actually holding people on benefits, and that was holding people back. And that again was reinforced by our polling, which said that 2/3 of people just didn't see any increase in good quality jobs in Scotland. Second point they saw was that young people's mental health was deteriorating and deteriorating badly. It was very interesting. One of the charities we spoke to said that they used to see, when they were working in schools, they used to see 1 or 2 pupils referred to them per class. Now what they were seeing were whole classes being referred because they just weren't coping. The third point is that they had seen increased loneliness and isolation. And 2/3 of the people that we polled thought that this had got worse. What's happening to the charities? They're seeing increased demand and decreased resources. What they're seeing is that as public services decrease and in some ways fail, they're seeing more complex cases coming towards them, and it requires more resource. And as a result, they're finding it more difficult. They're under financial pressure to actually meet the kind of demands that they're facing. The other thing they're finding is that there's still short-term project funding, which despite asking repeatedly for a core funding, that's just not happening. And they need new systems, they need an investment in overhead to keep them up to the standards that they need to operate. The second point that the charities are seeing is that they see staff burnout. They're just tired with working so hard. And what they're also finding with their staff is it's difficult to retain them and to recruit. And that's due to the low pay and the fact that in the private sector and in the public sector, there's better paid jobs. The other really important thing that we found in our polling was that there's a very low level of volunteering in Scotland. 85% of people say they never volunteer. And that's such a great shame and such a great weakness for the charity sector, where so much of the really good work that we see happens is done by volunteers. 2 previous CSJ award-winning charities, MCR Pathways and Safe Families, rely totally on volunteers. And these volunteers are the people who make a difference. And interesting that also our polling suggested that people want to see real people. They don't want to see professionals coming in, so that volunteers are an increasingly and vital part of what charities are able to do. The final thing that charities are seeing is that there's a failing relationship with Scottish Government and local authorities. It was referred to as a master servant and also an outsourcing of cuts. And unfortunately, what we see in the new budget coming forward for this year is likely to be a further failing in that relationship. I mean, I think it was only yesterday that in Glasgow, the unions were out protesting about the failing public services and the cuts that were coming in the current year. So, unfortunately, it's not a good picture that we saw. And unfortunately, it's also about to get worse. But please do read our report to get more detail. Thank you.